Welcome back to Chasing Masculinity, the podcast where we dive into what it means to live with purpose, integrity, and strength as men rooted in our values and faith. I'm your host, Colton Wutzke, and today we're exploring Rule 15, Brotherhood Should Be Celebrated. In a world that seems increasingly divided, where individualism is celebrated over unity, and differences often create more walls than bridges, it's easy to feel disconnected from others. But today I want to challenge that narrative. Brotherhood, true, meaningful connection, has the power to counteract that fragmentation. When we focus on what unites us rather than what separates us, we build stronger bonds and more supportive communities. During my time at a California state school, I found myself surrounded by fraternity brothers with very different political and social views from my own. Coming from a smaller, more conservative Midwestern environment, their progressive and very vocal stances were often worlds apart from my centralist conservative mindset. Initially, I thought it would be best just to keep my distance and avoid conflict or frustration. But because of that innate brotherhood that we shared, I knew I couldn't just retreat. Instead, I chose to focus on the commonalities that we shared, our commitment to our fraternity values, our mutual respect, and our love for the experiences that we were creating together. By doing so, I discovered friendships that far outweighed any polarizing opinions. In those relationships, we learned to engage in conversations respectfully, knowing that our bond was stronger than those differences. That experience just reminds me of the power of celebrating brotherhood, especially when dealing with issues such as politics and personal beliefs that are very, very dividing in today's world. Just remember, when we focus on unity and shared values, we create relationships and communities that transcend division. That's the central theme of today's episode. How can we embrace unity, celebrate our commonalities, and build stronger communities that reflect the strength of brotherhood in a very fragmented world? Psalm 133:1 says, "How good and pleasant is it when God's people live together in unity?" This verse perfectly frames our discussion. Brotherhood is not just a nice idea, it's a calling. It's about coming together despite our differences to create a sense of unity that honors God and uplifts those around us. Stick around as we unpack what it means to celebrate brotherhood and why it's a vital principle in today's world. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is the rise of individualism. There has been a cultural shift to self-worship. The world has moved from these, what I would consider commonly shared communal values, to complete self-sovereignty. Over the past decades, there has been this gradual shift from more community-centered worship, such as churches, to individual spirituality. And finally, that's just led to complete self-worship. This appears to coincide with the general shift of populations moving from more rural to more city center areas. In the 1800s, the population from rural to city was 10-1, and in the mid-1900s, it was 3-1. In 2008, it shifted from 1-1. Now I'm sure it's well superseded the rural to city ratio, where people are able to go and explore their individuality. Everything that they need, their favorite restaurants to go do this. Whatever they desire, they can find an avenue, a group, or at least some sort of venue that can support whatever they're feeling in the moment to go and explore. There's more job opportunities to do things that they want. There has just been a general shift, and I'm not saying that city life is inherently bad. I've lived in major cities for the past several years of my life, but there is certainly a shift from the mindset that the average American has of the community more towards the self. I think the pinnacle of this self-centered, self-idealized movement is the self-proclaiming gender movement, as it really is a manifestation of prioritizing individual identity over any sort of shared truths, to the degree that you're actually outright denying science and true biological beliefs because your self-identity proclaims a higher stance than that of commonly known facts. And while personal identity is important, its elevation above these collective values, such as brotherhood, has very much led to a major fragmentation in society. And what this does is it weakens community bonds. When you prioritize self-expression over these shared responsibilities, the familial and community ties are severely weakened. Think of the me-first mentalities in workplaces or families where these personal desires trump the collective well-being. I've definitely fallen into this trap where I will prioritize me going to the gym rather than being at home or doing something around the house that needs to get done, because I want to go to the gym because I want to feel better about myself because I X, Y, Z. And that's just kind of perpetuated in the culture, whereas if you talk about that, that doesn't sound inherently abnormal. Oh, you're working on yourself. That is such a big key component in today's self-help world is, work on yourself. And I'm obviously a big proponent of that, but it has to be kept in check as to why are you working on yourself. There's a reason. There's an end goal. The end goal is not self-gratification or to reach this status because you've worked yourself to this level of whatever you were going towards, but there should be a reason. There should be an end goal. There's a reason that you're working on yourself. And that should involve the community, your family, whatever you're trying to better. There should be a higher oriented purpose other than the self. When you are chasing that self-expression over shared responsibility, the result is communities become fragile. Individuals may feel isolated rather than connected because even if you live in an actual community, living in a city, living in an apartment complex, living in a gated neighborhood or some sort of HOA environment, whatever that looks like, it may be a community, but you're still isolated. I've been very fortunate to know several of my neighbors, but really it is a very, very small handful compared to how many are on my street. I have next door neighbors that I've never met because it is just so ingrained in our culture, the idea that you can physically live next to somebody or physically be in a community, but that does not mean you are communal. And focusing on our differences really just perpetuates this issue. I cannot stress a high enough warning against that excessive focus on communal differences. Think about just how far you can go when you are focusing on these differences, when you're celebrating every individual difference to an extreme. There are hyper-specific movements or niches that you can find yourself into, and all that's going to do is create division instead of unity. Because at the end of the day, your individualism is going to trump whatever community or niche you thought you found yourself in, only to realize that you can go a step further, and all of a sudden, it's just you in that box. So I really encourage you to reflect on how focusing on differences might actually be causing this alienation in whatever community you're a part of. So that's going to lead me into what I really want to hit on today, and that's the danger of excessive diversity. There is a value of diversity, do not get me wrong. Diversity reflects the multifaceted nature of God's creation, being created in His image. and that brings an irreplaceable richness to society. The contributions of various cultural traditions in enriching shared experiences, the obvious one being like food and arts and celebrations, can't be understated. It should be something that should be celebrated and shouldn't be squashed in this sort of hive mentality of you have to conform solely to where you are now. But the issue is when diversity becomes divisive. And overemphasis on these differences isn't going to lead to a better culture. All it's going to do is create a bigger wedge. And these differences are only going to fragment communities. Think of a hyper-specific celebration, such as a smaller cultural holiday. Things like Christmas are great. Yes, it's a Christ-centered holiday, but it's very inviting. It should be something that everybody celebrates. Around 90+% of Americans celebrate Christmas. And that can be great because I can tell you 90% of Americans are not inherently Christian. But it's a great all-inclusive holiday to be able to celebrate and a great tool to remember what it's about. But contrast that with a super specific holiday for a super specific niche of people. That's not going to be all-inclusive. What that's going to do is create a pocket of people who celebrate that. And it's not going to better the community. All it's going to do is create a division of either you do or you do not celebrate this. You're either in this pocket or you're not. And while celebrating uniqueness is good, it shouldn't overshadow a shared human set of values. And that's where there needs to be a balance between diversity and unity. Celebrating diversity in a way that enhances community cohesion is the proper way to celebrate brotherhood without throwing out diversity as a whole. Think about how Thanksgiving in the U.S. highlights shared values like gratitude while still accommodating some diversity of traditions at the dinner table. And that's the importance of celebrating commonalities. There are universal values that unite all of us. There are principles that transcend cultures, that transcend division and fragmentation, that will bring us together as humans. This is what brotherhood is. It's finding these things that regardless of what you believe and what you do on the day-to-day, there are things that will unite us. And in a post-presidential election state in America, there's rarely a time that is more divisive. But finding these commonalities, finding these things that really are meant to make all of our lives better, and celebrating them, rather than pushing them away, or finding reasons to create more division simply because the wrong person is the one proposing X, Y, and Z, that's not going to help us. Think about how we love for our children. That is a universal desire to protect and to nurture them and to want to make the world better tomorrow than it is today. I would be very hard-pressed to find anybody who doesn't want a world that's only better for our children. At least anybody who is any bit sane. Think of another one, like the sanctity of marriage and family as a stabilizing force in all societies. I know that there has been a big drive to reject the traditional idea of marriage and how individualism should be celebrated by going out and doing what you want when you feel. But the sanctity of marriage as a stabilizing force, the nuclear family as the key center, maybe it's not perfect, but as the center to a functional society is undeniable. And these are things that universally should unite us. Diving back into the non-secular, God's design for family as a foundational structure for human flourishing is key and can be found throughout Scripture. A man and a wife raising a family, a God-fearing family, should be universally celebrated. We have to find practices that build unity. We can explore traditions and communal practices that bring people together despite these differences. Think of community service projects, local festivals, or national holidays. I know of Christian organizations that are based on spreading the gospel of Christ, But their target audience and the people they help and the underserved communities that they're there to serve are not inherently Christian. A lot of them are non-denominational or reject Christianity and follow another religion entirely. And what they have done is gone out of their way to accommodate them. Despite the differences, despite the need to say no, not only are you not following Christ, you're actively turning your head away from them and following something else. We're still going to accommodate you because of this universally held belief that we are supposed to be here for each other as a community. So what are some things that we can do to actually celebrate these commonalities? Well, you have to identify these shared values within whatever your community looks like. And I don't just mean the street that you live on, although that's maybe a great place to start. And I don't just mean your church, although I guarantee you that is an amazing place to start, or your work environment, or your group of friends from college, or whatever other community you immediately think of when I say that word. It shouldn't really be any one of them. It could be all of them. Anywhere you are involved in a group of people that is distinguishable, that's a community. It could even be your local schools or just some shared holiday tradition with someone that you really don't know. That is an opportunity to be a part of a greater community. You can also attend or organize these inclusive events that promote unity over division. A piece of advice that my wife and I were given by another couple who has many years of wisdom to give. They also moved to a state without knowing anybody, without having any community, and without knowing how they were going to find a church and get involved. And they just started by inviting their neighbors over for a Bible study. And maybe no one or only one person showed up one week, or maybe several people did. It doesn't really matter, and it doesn't really matter if they're inherent Christians or not. It's really a form to communicate with one another and to get involved and to get to know one another. Now, differences are going to arise. It's just unfortunately inherent to human nature. And those differences aren't always going to work themselves out or be able to be overlooked. And that's where handling differences thoughtfully comes into play. A key part of growing as a man is accepting the reality of differences. You can't exist in your bubble that only supports your set of views. You can't live in your corner of Twitter or X. You can't only listen to the people that you want to listen to. You can't turn off all the other news stations that don't align with your views, because that is not living out true masculinity. You have to acknowledge that differences do and will always exist. But that doesn't mean they have to be used as a tool to divide us. Think of political differences among family members. It's the Thanksgiving nightmare trope, right? Uncle Joe is going to talk about Trump this year, or Aunt Jane is only going to quote CNN. It's pretty common for there to be some pretty stark political differences in between families. And that's fine. That's probably always going to exist because, again, that's just the differences we have to face day to day living as humans on this earth. Instead of focusing on these differences and trying to go at each other's throats, focus on the shared values and avoid letting those disagreements dominate the relationships. You also have to approach differences with empathy. I know it's the common masculine trope to have more ammo in a gunfight than whoever you're going up against. It's something I deal with on a daily basis. It's something that I pride myself in. But it shouldn't be the end-all, be-all. I'm not saying don't be informed, but it doesn't mean that every conversation that you go into is a battle that you have to win. Instead, try to go in without judgment and actually understanding the perspectives of others. I really struggle with this because obviously I think I'm right all the time. And when I hear varying beliefs, it's really easy to just kind of close your ears off and think, yeah, right, this guy does not know what he's talking about. But it really does cause so much less stress having those types of conversations when you just start by asking questions rather than immediately jumping into it being a debate. And I don't mean questions that are only going to corner the person to try to prove why you're right over them. I mean genuine questions to just kind of help guide the conversation and maybe move it away from a polarizing topic that's only going to create more division. This can help you find a common ground. That is my first strategy for navigating these differences. You need to start conversations with areas of agreement, and that's going to kind of build the rapport that will allow you to actually build a relationship and navigate these differences. You also have to respect boundaries. Not every disagreement needs to be resolved. It's okay to agree to disagree respectfully, especially when we're talking about things like political ideas. Do you really think being argumentative and proving another person wrong is going to make them hop the fence? Probably not. I know humans really have a tendency, especially men, to kind of dig yourselves into a foxhole when you start getting proven wrong. And I know that's not healthy, and I know that doesn't benefit anybody, but it seems to be inherent human nature. So going at someone's throat to try to prove them wrong doesn't help them. All it does is make you feel better about yourself and really sour a relationship. The last thing is to promote dialogue. Use open conversations to help foster that understanding rather than just creating pure division. This means not putting yourselves in the shoes of Harvey Specter as a lawyer and trying to ask them yes or no questions to put them in the corner that proves you're right. This means asking those genuine, open-ended questions that allows them to express themselves in a way that will help foster some trust in that conversation. Now, I want to take it back to the importance of community and family. The role that family has in community, as I mentioned earlier, helps drive this stability. Strong families and tight-knit communities provide stability and belonging. And I don't mean the stereotypical tight-knit family that is weird and only allows people who are like-minded to be involved and you can't actually interact with them. They're the other side of the fence group. I don't mean anything like that, and there are certainly religious groups who very much fall into that. I'm talking about tight-knit communities that drive inclusivity but really get to know each other, really understand each other on a deeper level. Think about how a healthy family dynamic creates a foundation for children to thrive and to pass down the values that they've learned. Communities that actually support families are more likely to produce a future generation that value connection over this individualism. This is how we can start changing the world for the actual genuine better, is revitalizing these communal attributes. You have to invest in a community of well-being. Some examples of collective efforts that would help strengthen communities would be like food drives or mentoring programs or building infrastructure like local playgrounds, things that encourage us to actually get outside or to do things with each other, or just having food and enjoyment and getting to know each other, even if it's just a little bit at a time. Contributing to community growth uplifts everyone, not just the beneficiaries. It creates a better community as a whole, and this can spread into a broader impact. Think about just beyond your immediate family. Consider how your role in improving the broader community could reach more than just your household, although that is where you should start, is within your own home. But then think about your neighbors and then their neighbors and your local community or your local park or the school your kids go to or the college that you're going to right now, the group of friends, or your small group or church or whatever you're involved with. If you play sports, if you have a men's league, whatever sort of communities you're involved in, if you actually start to really push the belief in commonalities or the concept of prioritizing brotherhood rather than just sticking with the few key people that you know roughly align with your beliefs, you're going to grow a community way bigger than you could have thought. And that's going to impact more than you could really see in that moment, because you're creating a community here and here and here, and that just grows and prospers, and your love is going to spread beyond just what you can see and the people that you can impact. And that leads me to starting with local commonalities. Start where you are right now. Begin fostering brotherhood within those immediate circles that you have access to. Think about what it would look like if you actually got to know your neighbors beyond just casual greetings. How hard would it be to go invite them over for supper one night, or to have them over for a drink, or to take them out for coffee, whatever that looks like? How easy would it be for them to walk next door and just get to know you for an hour? Or what about building deeper connections with coworkers? I know I've been really bad at this because the life I live at work is not the life I want to live everywhere else. So I put up those walls. I put up those walls with my coworkers. But the few times that I have gone out of my way to meet someone outside of work with my wife and their family, or whatever that would look like, those relationships are only strengthened by what very well could have been a cold workplace relationship where you say hi to each other and you ask how each other's weekend was, and you go back to doing what you're doing in front of your computer. By really getting to know them and sharing things about yourself and hearing their background and experiences, it's not just going to create a new avenue to grow in brotherhood with somebody, but it's also going to make your work environment better. Selfishly, you're going to only make your relationship with them, not just outside of, but inside of work as well, benefit. So what are some practical steps for building these connections? First thing, and the easiest, is to just learn names. Greet people by their names to let them know that you show genuine interest. I've always had a trouble remembering people's names, so I'll often say, "Hey man," or "What's up, dude?" And sometimes I do this even if I know the name because it's just kind of how I talk. But saying someone's name as you're conversating with them is a great way to let them know that you are invested more than just the mere nicety of returning a hi or how are you. You're actually getting to know them. And even if it's something as simple as the guy that works the desk at your gym, instead of just saying hey or how you doing, say his name, ask how he's doing, and then ask one follow-up question. Or just say some comment beyond the typical trope of what you're going to say in passing anyway. And that sort of relationship can slowly develop over time to something that can approximate a friendship and grow outside of the environment that you're just immediately interacting with this person with. The next is to join or create groups. I suggest creating a neighborhood Bible study if you're already not involved with some sort of community that's able to prioritize orientating yourselves properly in the world under God, or volunteering together, clean up the streets, or pick weeds at the playground, or selling cookies for the school, whatever that would be. Volunteering together in that community and doing something physically together will also help create those bonds. Or forming a local sports team or getting involved with it. If you have kids or you're active or you want to encourage more activity in your life and those around you, you can join men's leagues. Or if your kids are involved, you can start participating more and encouraging others to show up as well, even if they don't have kids or the talent to be involved directly themselves. It's more about the social environment than it is about the actual act of whatever you're doing. And the last would be just to engage in service. You can participate in community projects that create shared goals and camaraderie. A lot of established or even newer neighborhoods will have at least one sort of community event a year, if not several. Maybe there's a block party, or one of the people on your block are throwing a neighborhood Christmas party, or whatever that would look like. There are ways to get involved. And if there's not, why can't you start? Why can't you host a neighborhood Thanksgiving or a neighborhood St. Patrick's Day party, whatever that looks like, and just invite people? And yeah, most aren't going to show up, sometimes even if they say they will, but you're at least making the intentional effort. You're no longer putting it in your court, it's in theirs. And that shows effort and passion on your end. Now, obviously, there's a lot of obstacles in going about this, and it's much easier said than done because I by no means have perfected this or am even doing anything close to doing what I could be doing. Social anxiety and cultural differences are big stopping points. They're big red flags and reasons to just stop in your tracks and not worry about it, because obviously the world's gonna move on. The sun's gonna rise tomorrow if you don't do these things. It's not like it's up to you to save the planet here. So it's really easy to just turn your gaze the other way and say no. I feel like that's a problem that's really perpetuated in younger generations, is the ability to just say no because you can, and it's easy. Yeah, it takes effort. It takes a lot of effort to do things. It takes effort to do anything. That doesn't mean you can live a life of doing nothing. That's why you have to start small. Just start with brief conversations. Just like when I said getting to know someone's name and using their name in a conversation, that just leads to some really brief interactions. More than just the typical, hi, see you later, but just something small. You learn a little bit about somebody, a little bit more. And then each time that can compound. There's going to be a snowball effect. So starting small with those brief conversations is a great way to overcome some sort of social anxiety and to kind of gauge the temperature of whatever person you're talking to. The next is something that really kind of goes against, I think, everyone's intuition, which is to actually focus on listening rather than worrying about what you should be saying or how you're coming across. I'm very guilty of this. I'm a busy guy. I've got things to do. I'm walking away from someone mid-conversation. It's something I really need to get better at. But that's because I'm more focused on, I have said what I need to say, and now I need to move on. I'm not focused on genuinely listening. I'm more worried about whatever I'm supposed to be doing, or how am I coming across? How am I looking? Did I say the right thing? Did that sound weird? How can I get them to say this, but then I have to go here, so I don't want to engage in a long conversation. Whatever that is, I've kind of become the master of walking away mid-conversation to kind of end it where I want to end it. And that's not a great habit, because I'm not genuinely listening. And if you actually do that, you're going to learn a lot more than you think you will. So what are the joys in finding these commonalities once you've done that? Well, there are benefits to celebrating shared values. Finding these commonalities builds trust and strengthens the relationships and just fosters a stronger sense of belonging. All things that are key to brotherhood. Think about how a shared interest in sports or music can bridge some sort of significant cultural gap. Maybe you and someone have a massive differing opinion in the border or immigration policies, but you both like burritos. There you go. There's a commonality. That shared interest in food, or the impact of some sort of cultural diversity has on implementing and bringing that to you, that can be celebrated. And that's a great way to start bridging those gaps, and at least you have something that you can rely on foundationally if things go awry and division starts being created. So to help kind of find that common ground, I know I've said it before, but just ask open-ended questions. Ask about their interests, ask about their values. This makes someone else actually have to think on the spot and reply. You're going to get a little bit of insight on how their mind works, how they think, and that's a great first step in getting to know somebody. Next is to be genuinely curious and authentic in your interactions. Don't be fake. Don't embody that person that you see on TV. Don't think that you have to be this charismatic, outgoing person. The only person that you should be embodying is the person that you're trying to become. Not from a place of being fake or inauthentic, but it's actually the opposite. You are truly being authentic because you are truly trying to make yourself better and become that person. So really lean into that. Be genuinely curious and authentic with those people. The next is to reflect on those shared experiences, like if you both raise children or tackling some sort of local issue. Whatever that is, make it a center point. Point it out. Don't just let it pass, because that is how you can start to build those common grounds. So as my final encouragement, I do urge you to seek actively commonalities and to embrace them with that enthusiasm, and to find one person this week to connect with over some sort of shared value or experience, because this is how we celebrate brotherhood. So as we wrap up today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've explored today. Brotherhood is a cornerstone of a thriving community. But in a world increasingly divided by individualism, we need to be intentional about fostering unity and celebrating the values that bring us together. We walked through the rise of individualism and how it's eroding these communal bonds that once held us together, and how the antidote to this is shifting our focus from what separates us to what unites us. By prioritizing these shared values over self-interest, we can rebuild a sense of connection and purpose within our communities. Learning how to balance celebrating diversity with empathizing unity is key. Diversity is a gift that reflects God's image, but when it overshadows our commonalities, it can lead to division. The key is to celebrate diversity in ways that strengthen community bonds rather than fragment them. Building relationships takes effort, but by engaging in meaningful conversations, participating in community events, and focusing on shared values, we can create environments where everyone feels valued and connected. Now, I want to challenge you. Take some time this week to think about how you can celebrate brotherhood in your own life. Ask yourself, where can I build stronger connections with those around me? How can I focus less on differences and more on shared values? What steps can I take to nurture unity in my community? Remember, brotherhood isn't just a nice idea, it's a gift we're called to nurture. By celebrating our commonalities and honoring our shared values, we can create stronger, more united communities. I'd love to hear your stories. How are you celebrating brotherhood in your daily life? What actions are you taking to strengthen your community? Share your experiences on social media and tag me at Mr. Wutzke so we can keep this conversation going and inspire one another. I also want to hear your thoughts on today's episode. I'm doing it a little bit differently now, and I'm trying out a new method of recording, so I'd love to hear your thoughts and let me know how it went and if this is something you want to see more of. Thank you for tuning in today and for being part of this journey on Chasing Masculinity. Until next time, keep chasing.